designing and creating that makeup?
Little Big Man was a landmark in my career. It was a golden opportunity, one of these things that doesn't come along many times in a lifetime or a career. To do this extreme old age makeup, I mean 121. The oldest that had been done before was when I was a kid, which was in the Lost Moment, 110 years old. And so here I had a chance to top that. Well, so I knocked myself out. I did intensive research. I went to an old people's home and took pictures really close up and with wrinkled faces and got a lot of photographic reference, which I always have depended on and needed. So almost every wrinkle in that face came from a photograph of a real person, incorporated and woven into, the whole thing. And of course, there were problems. Dustin Hoffman has a neck. He was a wrestler as a kid. So he had this thick neck. It's as wide as his face. Just dealing with that was one of the problems. One of the unique things was the eyelids. For such an old person, they have to have droopy eyelids. And up to that time, all eyelids were kind of fixed things that were stuck on and didn't move. I worked out a way using, for the first time, I think, epoxy-faced foam latex molds instead of ordinary gypsum. So I could make really paper-thin lids, the wrinkles of the lids, which I purposely sculpted in a kind of like a little accordion. So they had enough delicacy and softness and that could be expanded easily as the eye blinked or closed. And they worked beautifully, except by bad luck, the contact lenses that I used, which were the first ones I ever used, and they were made in New York, and they were hard contacts. And we had no time for trial fittings, and when we came to film this damn thing, on the first day of filming, they kept falling out every time he blinked. So they had to leave them out on the first day, rush off to get them, try to fix them that night, and even on the three final days of shooting, they still were very sensitive to much blinking, so that Dustin tended to blink very little. And the edited film, there's not a single blink in the whole thing. It was very disappointing to achieve this, what I thought it was a technical triumph, and to not have it there. But the other thing that was unique about this was I had always hated having to do an extensive makeup, which I wanted to do in sections, because I had done stuntmen masks with covering the whole face with one mask. And they are a pain. They are very difficult to apply, and they don't work well because the foam latex shrinks. And so you get it on the chin, and by the time you stretch it up and try to get it under the eyes in the proper place, it's just tight, it's uncomfortable, it's hard to work with, it's hard to get the glue underneath it. I hate everything about it. So I used to do separate appliances. But when you're doing a whole face like that, how do you integrate them? You really have to sculpt it all in one piece. But how do you get the damn plastiline off in sections? That was my problem. And somewhere along the line, I solved the problem by painting a thin coat of a urethane rubber mold material, making a skin over the face of the life mask, and then peeling it off and sticking it back on rather tentatively with a little wax or a dental plate adhesive, I think, and then sculpting on that. And then I could cut through the whole thing and separate different pieces, and I could pull them off and pull the rubber out from behind and shift the models for the different parts of the face, the different sections, onto smaller molds, positives, and make the negatives from that. Eventually, I discovered somewhere along the line that a common dental separating medium, the trade name was Alcoat, could be painted on the plaster first, before the sculpture, allowed to dry. The plastiline could be sculpted over it. When it was finished, the entire face or head could be put under water, and the water would soak through the plaster, re-wet the release agent, and then the clay could be carefully removed, intact. That was a technical breakthrough.
A lot of younger people today are students of yours through your correspondence course. What made you decide to create the course?
Well, from early in my career, I was giving out information to younger makeup artists or other people who needed help or something, and formulas that I came up with. I would make a lot of Xerox copies and pass out blood formulas and things like that. So I was always aware of things that I was developing. And I'd read makeup books, and there was nothing much in existence. So I always had in mind that I'd like to write a makeup book. And I used to start, even in the early days, I used to start writing things. And I'd get so busy, I'd stop. And a year later, I'd say, pick up this partial manuscript. And I'd read it, and it was totally out of date, a year later. And this happened to me a number of times. I just gave up. This is hopeless, because it's always changing. Well, when I finally got my Oscar in 1984, I thought this is kind of a landmark in my life. For various reasons, I thought, you know, now's the time I really ought to seriously consider this. But I had to give up work to do this. Money, income. I couldn't really afford that. And I knew that selling a makeup book, the market is so small. You can't make much money on it, even if it's a great book. And you certainly can't count on anything. So that made me think about, well, could I make it into like a home study course? And that's why I developed it that way, added to round it out, added the videotape, tried to get as many pictures and in color and all that as I could. And that's how it developed.
When you've come up with the techniques that are now sort of standards in our industry, was that something that was born out of just tinkering around, or was that something that was actually sort of necessity being the mother of invention?
Well, with different reasons, some of them tinkering, some of them necessity. Like blood. Blood was essential. And the existing blood was things factor made, which are generally made out of oils or something like that, and looked terrible, looked like paint, were opaque, and you couldn't put them in the mouth. At least they would taste horrible. So I shopped the supermarkets. And one day I spotted Karo syrup. Didn't know what the hell it was. And so I experimented with it, and as you know, I found that food color could work well. I put frosting white in it originally to opaque it a little bit, and things like that, and eventually derived a more scientific formula. But it made, as you know, an excellent blood. It didn't stain, and you could even drink it if you wanted to. I first used it in a scene in Midnight Cowboy, where Voight punches a lecherous old man in the face. The guy really had false teeth, and knocks his teeth out with blood and so forth. And it was ideal. And then when Godfather came along, we actually did screen tests of real blood, all kinds of things, my formula, and mine won out as the best looking blood. So that really made it official. That was one of the things that was invented by necessity, and I found a happy answer for it, and it's been copied ever since.
As we've seen in the last 10 years since Jurassic Park, there's been an enormous movement towards computer-generated graphics. And what do you think the future is of special effects and makeup in terms of computer graphics and how they are going to now influence special effects and makeup?
I recognize the validity of those attitudes, and there's certainly things, hell, if I had altered states to do again, I would certainly want CG involved. Could have done a lot of interesting things that we couldn't do then. The thing with the arm was the most successful thing, using of bladders underneath the arm to make it look like there was something going on there. There are some things you can do pretty well with makeup effects, but there are many others you can't. And certainly to use CG is a great advantage. I think the last film that I was involved with where there was a combination of both was Death Becomes Her. We couldn't really do a good head turnaround in that, and so they went to CG. That was fine. My feeling about the future is that I don't think you can ever do without makeup for serious acting, simply because, hell, on every film I've been on, I've never seen, with maybe the exception of Otto Preminger, a director who was satisfied with the first take that an actor did. I've seen directors like Coppola do 20 takes, go on till we're all exhausted, and the actor is. But to get what he feels is maybe 1 or 2 takes where he really likes the performance, is something the actor has done that's just there. Now, how the hell are you going to do that with some guy animating, you know, an image? I don't care if every hair looks real and it looks exactly like Marilyn Monroe. How is the director going to control that performance? The human element is so important in real acting. It seems to me will save us, because we will have to have actors in some kind of makeup. And I also think the other thing is that there's a cost factor. Will it be cheaper to do it one way or the other? I mean, like Gordon Smith now is putting on silicone gel-filled appliances much, much more quickly than I could put on a foam latex appliance. Time is, of course, always money. There are a lot of various factors. It's just impossible to predict. Obviously, I want to see makeup continue in as many ways as possible. I cling to the things that I've just said as reasons why it's not going to die.
What's your advice to beginners?
There's an important point that you find that you're in love with makeup, that it is something that you want to eat, sleep, and think about all the time, just get such joy out of it, want to do, you know, maybe neglect everything else except if you're young, don't neglect your schoolwork. I have seen this in the top makeup artists. I've seen it in young proteges. I've seen this love and dedication so strong that I just know they are going to be successful. It's actually in anything that you do in life. I think happiness in life really depends largely on being and liking what you do, loving it if possible. I think it would be a nightmare to have to do work that you hate. It's a process, a growing attachment, regard, love, any of those things. That's what it takes. And you look for that. Or if when you find it, celebrate.